Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Welcome to the Marketing Your Practice podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk all about how you can implement systems in an effortless way into your practice. I've had a love-hate relationship with systems, particularly in the early days. That's where all the hate was. And I love them now because basically they give me more time and more profitability across my businesses. David Jenyns, who we have on the show today, is the author of a book called SYSTEMology. It's all about how do we go about implementing systems into our business. I love the framework that he teaches. So we're going to talk about where do you need systems, and then in particular, how do we go about actually creating them? He's going to teach you a framework right from the very beginning to assess which ones you need to begin with. And then we'll go through about how you set them up. Now, what was really cool about what he had to say is that often us as the person that's doing the thing, we're not actually the best person to be writing that system. He talked about why we should have a kind of third party there watching and overviewing us. This could be one of your other staff members. It's a fantastic way for you to implement systems into your practice. He talks about the importance of getting buy-in from our staff. If we have systems in our practice and they're not being implemented, then often it's because the staff don't understand the importance of them. He gave a really important mindset shift that we need to get our head around. If you've struggled with systems, then maybe this is what's holding you back. He's a fabulous guy. He's another local Aussie, Melbourne here. I think you're going to love this episode. It's full of absolute gold. Without further ado, let's go in and talk to David.
Welcome to the Marketing Your Practice podcast, where we guide natural health and wellness experts through the pitfalls of marketing. Each episode, you'll learn simple, effective, easily actionable, and heart-centered marketing strategies. And here's your host, Angus Pyke.
David Jenyns, welcome to the Marketing Your Practice podcast. How are you?
Fantastic. Pleasure to be here. Nice to have someone in Melbourne on the same time zone. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Not always easy. And you as a fellow podcaster as well know that when we're speaking to international guests, it does tend to kind of happen at all times of the day and night. We have a mutual friend in Alan Dibbs, the author of the one-page marketing plan as well. He was the one that recommended you come to us as well. I'm very excited to chat. I get excited about all our podcast episodes, but I have to admit, I do get excited about some more than others as well. You've written a great book called SYSTEMology. Now that's harder to say. Yeah, there it is there for those of us that are watching the video too. First of all, congratulations on that too. I'm always, because you've got some of the testimonials and the references there, Michael Gerber, the crew from Traction and stuff like that too. So, lots of people are writing books nowadays. Tell us a little bit about the story, what led to ultimately the production of this book and your journey along the way.
Yeah, this is my second book. So I perfected a system, as you'll probably learn about, for writing books that just really works for me. And it starts off with thinking about what is a problem out there in the world that I think has been poorly addressed or not solved in an elegant manner, and something that's near and dear to my heart. Then I usually go to work on it, and this sometimes is one-on-one work with clients. It ends up culminating though into a workshop, generally speaking. So I run a one-day workshop, and when I run the workshop, I think of it in terms of a book. So the different sessions are chapters, and I record all of it. Once the workshop's done, I give that recording to someone to transcribe. That transcription goes to a ghostwriter. The ghostwriter does version 1, and then I step in and take over from there. So SYSTEMology, I followed the same process. I did a presentation for EO in Melbourne here, the Melbourne chapter, entrepreneurs organization, and it was to address a very specific problem for a very specific person that I felt I had solved for myself, and something that I felt had not been addressed very well. And that's all centers around this idea of how do we remove the business owner from the day-to-day operations of running a business, and how do you actually systemize a business? Because I think many of the books you mentioned at the start, eMyth, Traction, there's a bunch of others, Built to Sell, Scaling Up, they all speak to this idea of systems, and all business owners intuitively know they're going to need systems, but they're oftentimes not systems people. They're big picture, visionary type thinkers, and they think, oh, I'm just not a systems person. And I think it's a very hard gap that most don't bridge. They don't get to the other side of this, and they get stuck in the operations. And I managed to do it in multiple businesses. So I just kind of kept on chiseling away at it on how do you do it? What are the steps? And that's really what evolved into SYSTEMology.
It part of my brain in the early days would see systems as that's the kind of thing that, NAB needs to do, Commonwealth, KPMG. But, I've got a chiropractic practice. It's kind of me as the chiropractor. I've got two staff people, one full-time, one part-time. That's really for big businesses. And a lot of my listeners will be in similar sorts of positions. Some of them maybe without any staff at all. They're running the business all by themselves as well. So are systems just for the big gang, or are they for us as small business owners as well?
There's definitely a lot of baggage that business owners carry around when you even say the word business systems, and it
Yeah.
comes from what they think business systems are. Maybe they think about ISO certification, or maybe they think about McDonald's. And when they think about McDonald's, they think, oh, every aspect is meticulously documented to the nth degree so that a 15-year-old off the street can come in and flip a hamburger flawlessly and create the same product. So they think, well, that's what systemization looks like. But what they fail to recognize is that's McDonald's that's been doing it for 60 years and has chiseled away at making these systems. And you're looking at effectively an Olympic athlete who's been training their whole life, and you're trying to compete at that level. So we have to go back to the start and think about, well, how did McDonald's get started? What do their early systems look like? What does it look like when you're only a very small team? And it has to do with not over documenting and simplifying what you think a system looks like. A system could be a little Loom or a Zoom video, or maybe it's a checklist, just which creates consistency in the way that something is completed. So I think a big part of that baggage is what people think systems looks like.
One of the conversations and concerns that I had in the early days too was the idea of that's all good and well for McDonald's because there is reproducibility in a cheeseburger. But, as a chiropractor, every person I come in and see me is different, and they've all got different kind of problems there as well. And it's that same kind of thing that I'm different that might well work for you. How do we address that concern that maybe some of our listeners might be having?
I used to own a video production company called Melbourne Video Production, and that is an extremely creative business with an extremely creative product that for every client that comes through the door has a different final outcome and then deliverable. Not only that, you're working with creatives, which are some of the most challenging people to try and systemize and get them to follow a process. So in situations like that, there are things in the business that had to happen. When someone, an inquiry comes in, the way that was responded to. When the person, we prepared the proposal, maybe there was a way that was prepared. When we met with the client, or just before we met with them, what would we prepare before we went out on shoot? There was a checklist. What are the key things that needed to happen out on the shoot? When we got back to the office, how would we move the footage into the computer? There's a range of things, and everything from invoicing, that just need to happen a certain way. And if you can get those done systematically to a certain standard, it actually frees the person up doing the work to do their most creative work. Or in the example of, a practice owner, if they're working with a client, if there's a way of having an intake form and what's said right at the start of it, before they even get into what are your problems and diagnosing the symptoms and getting to work, all around all of that, there are systems. What happens at the end of the session, and how do we then get them into the calendar to make sure that they come back again? And what does the follow-up sequence look like to make sure that they rock up? All of those things, if that could all just happen and happen to a great standard without there being a key person dependency. So, if there is an admin person, if they're off sick, how can we make sure that someone can step in and still execute to the same level? What that does is that would then free the the practitioner up to do their best work, because now they can just think about solving the problem of the client, not, oh, did I issue out that invoice correctly? Or did I follow them up correctly? Like you just want to get all of that out of your head so that you can focus on the good stuff.
So in essence, is it fair to say that systematizing, is it systematizing? Systematizing?
I say systemize because I feel like it's more efficient and shorter, but it is interchangeable.
I'm putting some extra kind of
That's right.
syllables in there as well. It allows us to do better work. And that's my experience of it when I have gone through to the effort of actually writing down standard operating procedures. It gets stuff out of my brain. It clears that all up there and allows me to focus more on the important tasks as well. Are there other reasons why we should be doing that?
There's many. Depends on where the person is right now, like the practitioner listening to this right now. What are some of the problems that you're having? Because yes, systems address, improving efficiency. It means that team members can take leave and the business can still operate. It means, you can have time off. It could mean that you're building a saleable asset. Now someone might actually want to buy your practice because you've got something more than just a business that's dependent on you. The business potentially can be more profitable, more scalable. You could open up more locations. Like there's lots of reasons too. I just find sometimes it really depends on the individual, like what's most important to them. But already I reckon someone's got a sense of what benefits systemizing would bring to them. Because I've never had a discussion with a business owner where we've come to the conclusion that business systems aren't important. We all know they're important. We all know that they should be done. It's just, why aren't we doing it? What are the challenges and the myths surrounding that?
Yes. I would imagine too that there are many of listeners there that actually have systems. They probably just haven't documented them. They're not seeing it as that's the system. There is a way that you kind of consistently assess your patients from start to finish. There are things that you reproducibly do each and every day when you come into the practice. We haven't kind of stopped and defined them as a system. So why don't we start with this? Like, where do you begin? Like, I like this idea. I'm feeling overwhelmed in my practice. I haven't had a holiday there too. I feel like I'm doing everybody's job. Each time I have a new staff person come in, I've got to start again. And I'm probably feeling like I'm the one that does the best job. So if I want a job done and I want it done right, it may as well be me doing it. That kind of thing is what I often hear when I'm talking with other practitioners. So where do we start? What are the priorities?
Yeah. So, and this is the first chapter in SYSTEMology. It's the critical client flow, I call it. It's to define what is the scope of works on where you begin. It's the, Pareto principle. What is the 20% of the systems that deliver 80% of the result? Because there are hundreds of things you could systemize in a business. Where do you start? Do you start on, for me, I say, we want to start to get to the point where the business can deliver a core product or service without any key person dependency. So if the business can make money, no matter who's working in the business, that's a win. That's where I start. So don't worry so much. It happens later when we look at hiring staff and onboarding and management systems and finance systems. All those things can come. But straight away, we use the critical client flow. It's an easy exercise. We can talk through it now. Someone listening can follow along with this. You just start off and you get an A4 bit of paper. In the top left-hand corner, you first identify who is the target client. That's the dream client. Who do you enjoy working with? Who pays your advertised prices? Who refers friends and family? Who comes back? Who would you like more of? Think about who they are first. Next step after that, in the top left-hand corner, underneath that, we think of what is the primary product or service that we sell to that dream client that is a great gateway product or service to the rest of your product line. What's the first thing that they might do, generally speaking? And that might be, I don't know, maybe they come in for an assessment. Maybe that's the first session that they have. So maybe that is the service. Then we go through, we move down the page and we're going to describe the linear journey that both the client and also the business goes through to deliver that core product or service. So we start off and we first think, how do we get the attention of that person? maybe there's referrals, maybe there's referrals from doctors, or you're doing social media, or maybe you're doing search engine optimization, whatever it is. Think about how you get attention. And I want you to think about only what you're doing, not what you would like to do. So
Right.
just capture what you're currently doing, not, oh, I have aspirations of running Google AdWords, but I'm not yet doing it. Like, don't put it down on the sheet if you're not yet doing that thing.
Yep.
Then the next step beneath that is, okay, if you've got someone's attention, well, what happens next? How do we handle an inquiry? How do the inquiries come in? You might say, well, I get a phone call, or I get an email, or maybe there's a web form. That would be the next step. Then we move down underneath that. What happens first? Is there any sort of like follow-up or qualification call or something? What happens then? Maybe you call them up, ask them some questions to see if it makes sense to book them in. Then there's some sort of maybe booking in to come and have your session. And I mean, every business is a little bit different. I'm going to tailor this to, practitioners, medical practitioners. And I don't know the business intimately, so correct me if I get pieces wrong, but let's say after you've booked them in, then what happens when, I just think about next, when they come into the practice, what happens next? Are there certain things that need to be done prior to them going into the room? Do they need maybe it's some sort of onboarding, maybe they fill out a questionnaire, maybe they give their Medicare details. Like, what happens next? And then we move down. What's the next step underneath that? What happens when they're having that first session? Like, is there a handful of questions or things that need to be populated at the first point of that call? And then you might, at that point, the system might be a little bit more loose, or a little more like guidelines, because every situation is going to be different. Maybe you got to first diagnose, maybe like higher level, it's diagnose and then run some tests, and then, make your, subscribe your solution. So you might just capture this. Basically, as you move down the page, you really only want, these just become boxes.
Yeah.
And it's only 1 or 2 words in each one of the boxes. You don't want to over document here. We'll get to the documentation later.
Yes.
It's just the high level flow. And then underneath that, I'm just going to even see, I can get this on the screen here, or, I mean, if you're listening to the audio, that might slowly pick up. No, my lights are a bit too bright. I was just trying to show the template itself. There is, if you go to systemology.com/academy, I just basically store the templates in there, or you can do it on an A4 bit of paper.
Right. I'll link to that.
Perfect. And then, down the bottom, what happens, at the end of that session, and, like maybe they walk out and they talk to the receptionist, and is there something needs to happen to rebook them in or bill them or whatever? It's just visually mapping that on an A4 bit of paper for the target client for a primary product or service. And then that becomes, it's almost like the field in which you want to operate first.
Yeah.
You want to document all of that. If you want to get, even further focused, think about where the problems are that you're having in the practice.
Yes.
You might say, I already have lots of leads. Leads aren't my problem. It's booking them in and delivering. Okay, well, let's focus in now on the delivery component first. But don't operate outside of the critical client flow and only capture the critical client flow. Because if you can document that, you're basically documenting how the business makes money. Yes. And that's the real takeaway here. We need to figure out what is the system for the business to make money. And then the holy grail is, how do we get that to happen without any key person dependency, without the business owner, or without any other key team members?
So can I run through what might be a bit of an example of that? If the niche, for instance, that I like to look after is men in their early 40s, professional guys who come in with lower back pain. So the gateway service is the lower back pain, but the core product that I want to get to is some kind of wellness or maintenance service where they're coming and getting a checkup, whether it be every 2 or 4 weeks afterwards as well. These people tend to come into me, let's just say, from an internal referral. So when I'm going through that,
just quickly because you identified the target market clear, when you went to the product or service, you were more thinking about what is the ongoing service. The actual gateway before that, I'm assuming, might be the initial service. And at the end of that initial assessment, then you're selling into the ongoing wellness.
Yes. Well, that's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to think in this situation. And for some people, like for instance, my practice, a lot of the care that we do is well-based care. We're all for, hey man, look, I know that the reason that your back is cranky is because you haven't cared for yourself for the last 40 years. So let's turn the smoke alarm off. Let's get your posture all sorted there too. Let's maintain it so you can have a thriving, happy life, be playing golf on the weekend, running, getting to the gym, all of those kind of things there too. But really, right, the actual core product that I would like my practice to be full of is people coming in once every 2 to 4 weeks just for a well checkup, a bit like a dentist, maybe that kind of thing there too.
I'd still say, what is the product or service that you would do do you
Yes.
sell straight into that, or would they
No.
come in? No. So systemize the bit first
Yes.
before you get into the recurring or what you'd like to get them into.
Got it. And so then if we were going through that, so in this case here, I'm going to call that, am I going to call the person with the cranky back, that's the core product, or is that the gateway service? Because I guess in a digital business, like I am now, for instance, I have a gateway service that might be somebody downloads a free kind of lead magnet, or even this podcast, for instance, is part of a gateway service for me.
So they would be more part of the lead, like getting the attention.
Yes.
The gateway service is something that is sold.
Right. Okay.
Like you want to take money for it, because what we're trying to do is systemize how the business makes money.
Yes. So going back to that patient then, is the gateway service their initial problem they came in with, but I want to ascend them to what I feel my core product is, which is kind of a wellness offering?
So the product or service is not the problem that they come in for, but what is the product or service that they buy to solve the problem that they're coming in for?
Yeah. So in my case, it might be a series of anywhere between 4 and 20 adjustments to get their problem solved.
So it's an adjustment. There you go. So the core product would be the adjustment.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. And so then, thank you. I took you through a maze to get to that answer that question there too, because I think this might be helpful for some of our listeners, because to have it laid out like this is a really great spot to start with, because then, if we say that they come from an internal referral, the first way they access our practice is with a telephone call most times. So I go, okay, there's a telephone call that we would box that too. There's a booking that's done online through our computer system there as well. Then they come into the office, they're welcome and greeted in a certain way. There's forms they then need to fill out. Then they're taken through into the consultation room, and then it all ends up with work with the chiropractor. And then there's, again, stuff that needs to, then they're checked out, again, handed back over to the front desk, and they're rebooked in. And there's a series of these kind of rebook ins through there until they graduate, so to speak, until the next phase. That's kind of the process that we would then go through. Yeah, it's such a neat way. I sometimes find myself starting in the middle of, rather than taking it right back to the beginning as well. Like, okay, let me just take it back. These are the steps that somebody goes through when they interact with our practice. Let's get those things written down.
And like you said, for most people, especially if you're in a small business, these are already happening. There is already a system, whether it's documented or not. Someone is following a process. So the key, and it's later in the stages, it's the next step in SYSTEMology. So the first one's define.
Yes.
And the second step is assign. So we want to figure out where this knowledge currently exists in the team. And we're looking for, ideal scenario is to take the business owner out of this equation, because the business owner knows how to do everything and they do it flawlessly and they're the best and no one can do it as well as them. Yeah. So, okay, we know that's the case, but let's imagine, if there's a team member that can do it pretty well or 80% of the way there, let's nominate them as the knowledgeable worker, which is going to be the person that we extract this out of their brain.
Yes.
So that's kind of when we start to move into step number 3. If step number 1 is define, step number 2 is assign, step number 3 is then extract, which has to do with how do we capture what you're currently doing in the moment to make it as easy as possible to capture. Because most people don't like documentation. Most great team members, business owners included, are already busy. Yes. So the idea of doing documentation and getting a system down, yes, it's important. It's not urgent. I'll get to it later. So we just want to simplify that process. And that's kind of where we move into stage number 3.
When you're extracting that information, What's the best way to extract it? Is it an interview? Is it a video? Is it somebody writing that down? Is it a combination of all of those? And then I guess that then gets into the same question really when it comes to kind of organizing it afterwards, the next step here too.
Yeah.
How have you found the most efficient way for businesses to be able to extract the information?
Biggest tip I can give someone, and it can be a light bulb moment, is to understand it's a two-person job. You've got the knowledgeable worker, and then
Yes.
you've got a documenter. Have that as a separate person. It's the job of the documenter. Generally speaking, I get them to record the knowledgeable worker doing the thing in the moment, so that the knowledgeable worker doesn't need to go out of their way. Like sometimes that may or may not work, because you might go, oh, well, we're in medical and, there's privacy concerns, blah, 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 blah. So now we can't record that happening. Okay. Well, that being the case, then maybe you do role play it. So it'll depend on the situation and certain parts. Ideally, if you can record the person doing the thing and you just do it as raw as possible, sit over someone's shoulder, record them with an iPhone, do it on a Zoom, do it on a Loom, do it on I would just like to capture them doing it. If it's a sales call or a meeting, just get your iPhone out and record the audio, go into a quiet room, put them on speakerphone, get both ways. Again, sometimes you need to think about the privacy concerns, and I'll let the person decide what works for them and whatever. But the takeaway is record it getting done from the knowledgeable worker and have a separate person who then can record it, but then also watch it and then pull out the key steps, because then they can go back to the knowledgeable worker and go, well, here are the steps that I identified. And everybody loves to edit. No one likes to edit from a, blank, or start from a blank page.
Yes.
So if you go back to the knowledgeable worker and saying, well, here's what I learned from watching you doing your thing, they're going to be much more likely to go, oh yeah, that is kind of a step. Oh, I see. Oh, yeah, I kind of missed this. I didn't mention that. And that it just becomes version number 1 of a system. That's the other thing. Just think of these as raw version 1. We're just getting the process started. We'll improve it and change it and tweak it over time. Initially, just capture what is getting done. And that kind of helps to address some of those concerns.
And the documenter doesn't necessarily, I would imagine, have to have anything to do with the business per se.
No.
It could be somebody external. And I kind of almost wonder whether there might be some benefits in it being somebody external because of the way they might watch and they might see things that we take for granted that have really become, consciously unconscious.
100%. There are, if you're looking, if you wanted to recruit and get this person, and we sometimes call them a systems champion, someone who works inside the business who really drives this forward. You're looking for the person who's naturally an organizer, detail orientated, an admin type person. If you wanted to go the extra level, we also have, we call them SYSTEMologists, and they're kind of trained in our method to do and work alongside clients to do this. But everything's outlined in the book, and you could give it to a systems champion and say, read and follow the book.
Yes. When we go from kind of extraction to organizing, so it's gone through a couple of different edits per se until we're happy with it. Going back to the same question there too, do you find the deliverable of that system is better in a particular format? Is it better written? Is it better video? Is it better audio, or a combination of all of those?
Yeah, generally speaking, we start with video and capture it happening in its entirety. Because then if someone's doing something for the first time, to actually watch it getting done like you're watching someone over the shoulder,
Yes,
is a great way for them to learn first go at it. Then, though, you also want to pull out the bullet points underneath, because you don't want them having to watch the video every single time. After you've watched it once, maybe next time they just need to skim through what the steps are. Maybe they do that a few times, and then over a period of time, they might end up nailing it, and they might not even need to have the system open every single time. But I always say to team members, and the way to manage it, I don't care whether or not you have the system open or not. We have a way of doing things here, and you've got to execute it to that level. And if you don't know how to do it, have the system open until you can execute it flawlessly. If you've got it down, then great. Well, you can do it because you're kind of following the process. And then it becomes a management thing where, hey, you've made this mistake. You didn't follow the process. Well, next time you've got to have the process open.
Yeah, I totally get it. And I can see that I've done in the past, sometimes I've just had the video there as well. And sometimes I've had it written, but I can see the benefit of just the summary underneath when somebody needs to go back and kind of just check that process out. One of the difficulties I've had with systems in the past, when I was preparing for today, I kind of wrote it down as systems drift. So, and I don't know where it happens, but all of a sudden we're 6 months down and
Yeah.
we're answering the phone a different way. And I'm like,
Yeah.
how did that happen? It's the same staff here. Everything was kind of good. And now I'm listening out and we're running some other whole program from there as well. How do you deal with that? How do you manage and keep people on track
Yeah.
because sometimes the other thing I hear with systems as well is there's a level of monotony that sometimes comes with, hey, do you want fries with that? I want a level of creativity to come in and show a bit of flair as well. So how do we manage between
Yeah.
those?
There's a couple of really good points in there. Firstly, when I think about systems, I want to hire really great people. I'm not hiring 15-year-olds off the street to come in completely unskilled labor, and I need them to know exactly step by step, and I'm making a robot. I'm hiring great team members, and I see systems as a rule book, as guides, and I want them to think. Just because they've got a system, I don't want them to think. So part of that has to do with creating a culture of systems thinking and this idea of improvement. Just because it's written down a certain way doesn't mean that things can't be changed and improved and, we could tweak and move that. So part of it is a culture thing. You need to kind of reinforce that. Another part of it, and that's from a management perspective, we're starting to talk about bridging the gap between, being the founder startup and then potentially at what point do you maybe need some sort of operations manager, depending on the size and how you grow. Then there needs to be some sort of manager, and oftentimes they're different people. There's a leader and there's a manager. There's a visionary and an integrator. This is talked about in a few different places. The visionary is usually the founder. They've got the big ideas. They're great at starting things quickly. They kind of get things off the ground. They get the business rolling, but they're not necessarily the great at the follow through and the finish and making sure that you're crossing the T's, dotting the I's, and doing the management. And that's when you might get a practice manager in, and then it's their job to manage the people and make sure that they're following the process and making sure that there's good QA in there, quality assurance. And the other thing that you can do as well is thinking about and it might depend on the practice and it might depend on the task, but whether or not you have some form of project management platform or something that creates a level of accountability where when you assign a task, you link to the system or process when you're assigning a task. Because then if someone ticks off the task and there's a system or a process already in there, they're effectively saying, I've followed the process as you've outlined it, and I'm saying it's complete. Now, if it's not done to the appropriate standard, it's much easier to say, well, hey, you ticked off that you did the client onboarding, and you got everybody into the system, but you didn't do it right. You didn't populate this field or this field. You don't tick it off unless you're going to follow the process. That sometimes also helps to solve the problem, because oftentimes people create systems and processes, gets loaded into a Dropbox or a Google Drive or System Hub or something like that, and then the only time they reference it is when new team members come on board.
Totally.
And everybody kind of forgets about it. So it's creating the culture, it's creating it, keeping it front and center, it's integrating it with your project management, it's getting an ops manager. There's a range of things in here potentially to help solve that.
Are there best practices for how often a company should be reviewing their systems? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Some of this comes from, and it'll depend on industry to industry, because if you're going for ISO certification, you're required sometimes to have review points. So it depends on that. There's also, this thought process that, I need to, once a year, I need to be looking at this and creating the space. What I prefer to do, and it depends on the size and type of business, we change the culture where we're constantly looking to improve and adjust systems. So when there is a problem or someone's following a process and we can see a change or something breaks down, or we want to be fixing that in the moment, or at least logging it and then creating the space to be able to address it, as opposed to we've got an annual review process. Because the best way to improve any system is by the adjustments based on the problems that are occurring.
Yeah.
Similarly, what systems do you build? Once you've got your base set of systems down, let's say you get your critical client flow down, let's say you get some department systems into place. Once you get the basics down and you've done the 80-20 on the business, the best thing to do is to listen to your business and see where the problems are. And you go, I don't have enough leads. Okay, well, all problems are systems problems at the root level. So, well, now we need to create lead generation systems. Or I have some problems with getting payment from clients. Okay, well, you probably have some invoicing client payments, or I have some cash flow issues. Okay, well, maybe we have some cash flow systems problems. So my approach is a little bit different. I don't do it for the sake of doing it. I try and listen to where the problem is, and then we look for the system solution.
Yeah. You kind of reminded me in there too. I remember when I was reading through the E-Myth the first time, one of the stories we often tell ourselves as small business owners, natural health practitioners, is that you can't systematize other chiropractors per se, because there's, it's a creative thing. There's the human interaction, all those kind of things there too. And you just kind of remind me that somewhere inside that Gerber says, look, it's all a training. You just don't have good enough systems to train them. That's all it is. It's higher levels of us being able to, find and train our staff as well. We tend to not be all that great at that as well. One of my challenges has been, as you kind of mentioned there before too, is that I'll put a system down there, David, I'll get all going, and then I will find along the way, this is a better way to do it. And then I'm not updating it in those processes. And then before I know it, the system, I have a new staff person come on, and there's been that many iterations of the system that the staff are running that I try to train a new person on it too. So capturing those iterations as they move forwards.
You need to make it easy on yourself.
Yes.
And you also maybe need to think about, if you're finding you're just not doing it, maybe that's a good cause for thinking about, well, who is the systems champion?
Yes.
So maybe it's the admin person where you go, this is part of your role. Occasionally, I'm going to come up with a wacky idea on how we should improve something. Yeah. I'm going to do a little voice memo for you. I'm going to send a little note, and then I want you to do it on my behalf.
Yeah. And that's a perfect example, as you said before. I know it gets a bit meta, but where are the problems in my business? Well, the problems are I'm not really updating my systems. So therefore, I need a system on updating my systems. Yeah, I can see that. And so therefore, I could... I think it comes back to this idea that many small businesses suffer from. I do too, is that I have to be responsible for everything, as opposed to just me saying to my VA, for instance, hey, Jason, we've now changed the colors that we're using on the borders around the videos. We're only using that green and the gray. Here's the hex colors for both of them. Can you change that in the style guide, please? Like instead of thinking, and that's easy for me to do because it's 90 seconds, not even that too, but me getting in there, doing all that kind of work there as well, that's what gets overwhelming. So a system in around that will be.
If you take on the idea, and it's an interesting thought experiment to just imagine, if anything relies solely on you or it's defaulting to you, your business is broken. So you need to try and think about how can we take you out of the mix as much as possible, because, and it depends on where you are in your business. In startup mode, yes, the business owner's doing all of it. There's only one or two staff. It might be you're getting it off the ground. You've got to do everything. You've got to solve all the problems. You've got to get the clients. You've got to deliver. You want to serve the best customer experience. At some point, that will need to change. Otherwise, you end up developing this really strong muscle of fixing every problem. And then you end up training your staff that I don't really need to think, because anytime I know that there's going to be a problem, well, Angus is going to come and solve it for me anyway. And he's, you're the knight in shining armor. So you end up training your staff to come to you, and then you're solving the problems. You get, really good at solving problems, but then you're also not allowing them to solve some of the problems as well.
We were working our way through those kind of 7 parts of the system before we got up to kind of from extraction into organizing. The next step through there is to integrate. Can you talk a little bit about how the best integration of a system works if it's going to be kind of effective?
Yeah, look, the biggest thing is getting buy-in from the staff. They need to buy into this, and most of the resistance you'll get is from existing staff. As you said, Michael Gerber, and he had, when we did some work together, he'd commented that you want to see every business as a school, and you're taking these unrefined students and you're kind of training them up to the point at which they're productive. So all new team members that come on board are going to get trained in your way of doing things, which means you can implant this systems thinking and everything up front. The challenge is for your existing staff, which is, I've always done it this way. Why do I need to change?
Yeah.
And that's the piece we need to work on. We need to help them to understand the benefit to them, which is, and that'll be different for everybody. Some people will want to take holidays. Some people want to move up the ranks in your organization. Some people want things to go more smoothly. You want to think about what's important to them and help them to see how the systems will improve their way of work. That's probably the biggest piece in integrate.
And I would imagine too that if they have been involved in the extraction and the organization of it as well, it's probably easier to get them to kind of buy in because they were partly involved in the process of it as well. But, it's a good reminder to me always to be communicating in benefits to the person who I'm chatting with, the good of what's in it for them as well. So any other integration hurdles that you typically see that businesses have?
I think the biggest thing is understanding that the most resistance comes right up front.
Yes.
So you don't actually get hardly any of the benefits of systemization till you push through that pain. Once you layer the benefits of positive systems on top of each other and you get this compounding effect, and once you get through all of the resistance of the team members who won't do it, that's only when you get the biggest win. So most people abandon it too early, and then they say, I'm just not a systems person. I tried to systemize and it doesn't work. Systems aren't for me. And the problem is it's giving up too early.
Yeah.
And changing the culture. Actually, that's the last thing I'll say as well. We're talking about changing the culture of an organization. That's why it actually gets exponentially harder the bigger the organization gets to insert systems thinking into the business.
Yes.
Because once you start to talk about changing culture, that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, got it. After integrate, the final two steps are all about kind of scaling and optimizing as well. What do they look like?
Scaling is just about then identifying the systems required to grow outside of the critical client flow. So that might be recruitment and onboarding. That might be your management type systems. That might be some of the finance systems, all those things. That's scale. It's how do you identify the 80-20 of the systems in the different departments in your business.
Yep.
And then the last one, optimize, which is a funny one to leave till the end. It's a counterintuitive thinking because people think when they create systems right up front, they want to capture the system just right. They want it to be perfect. They'll start making changes in stage number 2 or stage number 3 of how they would like it to be. And I always say, just model what's already working, figure out who's doing it the best, capture that because you get tremendous wins for bringing everybody up to that level. The optimization happens last. We get, we can start to measure and listen to the business and then we work on the business.
Yeah, I love it. You've sold me again, David. There are areas where I am a systems junkie and I love it. With lots of the business, my digital business as well, I just realized in particular when I was dealing with virtual assistants, there was just no other way. And particularly when there was some language barriers in there as well, where English wasn't the first language. I was constantly kind of complaining, bitching and whinging that it was hard to get good VAs when I realized I was a really lousy kind of support person for it. But there have been some areas of which my daughter, who works with me around her university and at my chiropractic practice, she was having a go at me yesterday. And the answer to all the concerns that she had are systems, which you kind of brought up today as well. So where do people go to find your book where do they go to learn more about you? You've got some great content on your website and some videos, podcasts, stuff like that as well. Where do they go?
Yeah, thank you. Probably head to systemology.com/book. And then from there, there's lots of links, whether it's YouTube or signing up to our Business Processes Simplified podcast, which is a little bit different from yours. I think we just focus on the systems side of things. I find an expert, I interview them, and then I get them to share a system or a process, and we talk through that step by step. But all the links, from that systemology.com/book, or if you prefer, just head to Amazon. If you're listening to this, you're probably an audio person. So there's, you can grab it on Audible as well, or you can grab the physical or both. But Amazon or systemology.com/book.
Did you read the book?
I did. The only audio books I like are the ones where the author does the audio, because I feel like there's something magical when it comes out with their voice. Because Michael Gerber wrote the foreword for the book, I even got him to read his foreword, and I got his wife makes a cameo in it. The audio book's really fun.
Yeah, nice. Well, I'm excited too. I'm going to add this one. I have a dual book club with two of my best buddies, and I want this one to get in our cycle. It's one that I would really like to kind of dive deep and study with them also. So David, thanks so much for today. You've just all of my questions, you just knocked out of the park as well. I want to encourage all of our audience to go and get a hold of the book. At the very least, go to David's website there too. There's a couple of really great little videos on there with David talking about the process as well. So any final words that you would like to leave for our listeners?
Look, the biggest thing I do, and my whole mission here, is to free business owners from the day-to-day operations of running their business. I want to light that fire underneath you. I want to bring systems to the forefront. I want you to get excited by systems, not by the idea of documenting them. I don't know who gets excited by documenting systems. I want you to get excited by the results that the systems can bring. I have seen firsthand what a systems run business looks like compared to one without systems. And there's just no comparison. So I want you to really use this as an opportunity to say, just because I might not be a systems person doesn't mean I can't have a systems run business. You can. I've seen it. So hopefully this is enough to inspire them to take some action.
Yeah, well, beautiful, David. Thank you so much. I want to wish you all the best with the sale of your book. I'm sure it'll continue. The reviews already over on Amazon are fantastic. There's hundreds of them already, and the rating is as close to a 5-star, I think, as you can pretty much get there as well. So congratulations on that. Best wishes moving forwards. And I look forward to hopefully one day catching up with you in person.
Perfect. Thanks for the opportunity. And thanks for having me.
My pleasure, mate. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out the Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work one-on-one with you to apply, implement, systematize, and help guide you and your practice to the next level. Now you can join me on over at addiomedia.com/join. That's addiomedia.com/join. I'd love to see you in there.